Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that half of your savings have quietly and silently evaporated. Nobody stole it. It wasn't lost. It simply disappeared, evaporated. Nobody had broken into your home. Your bank account hadn't been hacked. The one who did this was your government, through completely legal provisions while you were sleeping. And here's the most terrifying part. This has already happened to you. It is still happening right now. And for more than 2,000 years, in different forms, it has been happening without stopping. Today I'm going to show you a pattern that stretches from the Roman Empire to the 2008 financial crisis. A pattern that governments and financial elites have used over and over again throughout the centuries, each time repackaged under a different name. But let me warn you now, by the end of this video, your view of government spending, inflation, and national debt will change forever. Let's go back to 3rd century Rome. At that time, the Roman Empire is the most powerful civilization in the world. Its armies stretch from Britain to Persia. Its roads connect continents. Its currency, the denarius, is the equivalent of the dollar of the ancient world. It contains real silver, a guarantee engraved in metal. Merchants in Egypt, soldiers in Gaul, traders in Syria all have complete trust in the denarius. But there is a problem. Wars are expensive, and keeping an empire of this size standing requires a flow of money, too large to be covered by taxes alone. The emperors face a choice: either raise taxes openly and risk revolt, or find a quieter path. They chose the quiet path. Slowly and silently, in a way that would barely be noticeable, they began reducing the silver content of the denarius. At first, nobody noticed the coin that was 90% silver was tampered with and became 80%, then 60%. Then 30%. By the end of the 3rd century, the denarius was essentially nothing more than a copper coin, a fraud coated with a thin layer of silver. The empire continued to spend. Soldiers received their full pay on paper, but those coins could buy less and less with each passing year. Merchants raised prices, savings evaporated, ordinary Romans watched their financial security melt away, and most of them didn't even understand why. There was no central bank, no interest rate decision, no press conference. There was only a currency growing lighter and a life growing heavier. History's first inflation trick had revealed itself, and today the same game is still being played, just on a more sophisticated stage. Medieval Europe had opened a new door to this game: forced borrowing. Monarchs in England, France, and Spain regularly invited wealthy merchants and guilds to lend money to the royal treasury. Of course, it was certain that these invitations were not voluntary. Refusing meant fines, seizure of property, or even worse consequences. Sometimes the crown would promise repayment with interest, but repayment either came in devalued currency or never came at all. The government continued its wars and its palaces, while merchants found they had no other choice. The trick here was this. The name given to coercion was patriotism and duty. In honeyed words, they said, "Make your sacrifice for the kingdom." Nobody said, "We are seizing your property." Sweet language concealed the truth, and this trick worked for centuries. By the 17th century, because money was needed to finance the wars with France, the central bank was established in 1694. This was not an act of charity. The financial system itself had turned into a trick. Wealthy investors purchased government bonds, and in return the crown guaranteed interest payments financed by taxes. It sounds like a fair deal, doesn't it? But think about this. Who was paying those taxes? Ordinary people through taxes on basic goods like salt, beer, and cloth. The wealthy lent money to the government and earned secure interest. The poor paid higher taxes to cover those interest payments. This was a wealth transfer system dressed up as national finance, and it cemented a pattern that still operates today. The safest investments in the world are lending money to governments, and the guarantee behind those returns is ultimately the labor of the masses. By the time we reach the modern world, the tricks had become even more refined. Think about the 2008 financial crisis that brought the global economy to its knees. Banks placed reckless bets, converted toxic mortgages into securities. But who paid the price? Ordinary taxpayers, of course, through the massive bailout packages the government funneled to the banks. And who held on to the profits from this situation? Those exact same banks, emerging bigger and more powerful than they were before the crisis. The trick was simple. Profits were privatized, losses were socialized, and the public was told this was necessary to save the system. There was no other choice, they said. But have you ever asked this question? If the banks made such bad decisions that they were going to collapse, why did taxpayers bail them out? And why did none of those bankers go to prison? The pension system is also part of this game. For decades, people in the United States, Britain, and across Europe paid into government-managed systems thinking and trusting that the money would be there when they retired. But governments mostly don't actually save that money. They spend it immediately and leave behind an IOU note. According to the promise, when that bill comes due, future taxpayers will pay it. This is essentially an intergenerational Ponzi scheme wrapped in official language. The plan works until demographics shift, the population ages, and the system becomes unsustainable. Then the government makes reforms generally by cutting benefits, raising the retirement age, or eroding the real value of payments through inflation. And these moves are always presented to the public as, "We had no choice." Nobody openly reveals the trap that was set from the very beginning. So what is the common thread running through all these tricks? Perception. Each time the public is given a different name for it. Inflation is presented as growth. Forced loans are packaged as patriotic duty. National debt is called investment. Bank bailouts are done in the name of stability. Pension cuts are launched as innovation, that is reform. Language covers the truth, and the reality behind that mask is always the same. The transfer of wealth from the many to the few, from the bottom to the top. Because the great majority of people don't study economic history. History shows this has worked for centuries. They don't understand financial systems, and they don't notice the trap. And this ignorance is the most powerful trick of all. In recent decades, the tricks have become even more sophisticated. Quantitative easing, a concept most people had never even heard of before the 2008 crisis. Central banks created trillions of dollars out of thin air, purchasing government bonds and mortgage-backed securities to stabilize markets. Politicians and bankers said this was a necessity to prevent collapse. And it worked for the financial system stocks. Real estate and bonds surged dramatically. But who owns the vast majority of these assets? The wealthy. For the average household without large investments, the benefits were minimal, while the disadvantages came in the form of distorted markets and rising cost of living. Money creation saved the system for those at the top while fueling inequality and inflation for everyone else. Now I stop and ask you directly, after learning all of this, what do you need to do? Because knowing is not enough. History teaches us this. The people who kept their distance from these tricks were the ones who understood the system. They were the ones who didn't accept every announcement at face value. When a stimulus package was announced, they asked, well, who benefits first? When inflation rose, they didn't see it as a matter of luck. They knew it was policy. When regulations came, they investigated who wrote them and who benefited. Building real wealth means owning assets that can hold their value even in times when money is losing its worth. And it means not assuming that the system is working for you just because it says it is. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with. The financial tricks that left Roman citizens impoverished are essentially the same ones draining your bank account today. They are simply dressed in modern language. Just as the silver in the denarius diminished, so does the purchasing power of your money. Just as monarchs forcibly seized the wealth of merchants, modern governments do the same through taxes, inflation, and hidden mechanisms. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but if you haven't understood it, it will pass right over you. The only difference is whether you recognize this cycle in time. If this video has given you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. History holds the answers if you know how to look.